In a small, remote village nestled in the Andes Mountains, a little girl plays outside her family's modest home, her laughter echoing through the dusty streets. She's just 5 years old, a child who should be chasing dreams, not facing a nightmare. But in 1939, this girl, Lina Medina, became the center of a medical mystery that shocked the world. She gave birth to a baby boy, making her the youngest confirmed mother in history. How could this happen to a child so young? Welcome to Global Shadows, where we uncover the darkest crimes against the innocent. Today, we're telling Lina Medina's story, a tale of trauma, resilience, and unanswered questions that still linger nearly a century later. Lina's case isn't just a medical anomaly. It's a heartbreaking reminder of the vulnerability of children and the shadows that can hide in even the smallest communities. Born in Ticrapo, Peru, Lina was a typical little girl until her parents noticed her belly growing. Fearing a tumor, doctors soon discovered the unimaginable. She was 7 months pregnant. On May 14, 1939, Lina gave birth via cesarean section to a healthy boy named Gerardo, after the doctor who delivered him. The birth made headlines worldwide, but the joy of new life was overshadowed by a haunting question. Who was the father? Lina's young age pointed to a horrific truth. Someone had abused her, yet the perpetrator was never identified. Her father was briefly arrested but released for lack of evidence, leaving the crime unsolved. Lina's story challenges us to confront the realities of child protection, the strength it takes to survive trauma, and the lessons we can learn from her courage. As we explore her journey, from a tiny village to global infamy, from a child forced into motherhood to a woman who rebuilt her life, we'll honor her resilience and ask what her story means for us today. Let's step into 1930s Peru and uncover the mystery of Lina Medina, a little girl whose life changed the way we see innocence forever. Ticrapo, Peru, in the late 1930s, was a world far removed from the bustling cities of the time. Nestled high in the Andes Mountains, this tiny village of a few hundred people was a place where life moved slowly, shaped by the rhythms of nature and tradition. The air was thin and crisp, the landscape a patchwork of rugged hills and small farms where families grew potatoes, quinoa, and corn to survive. Most homes, including the Medina families, were simple adobe structures with thatched roofs, their walls weathered by the mountain winds. Lina Medina, born on September 23, 1933, was the fourth of 9 children in a family that lived modestly. Her parents, Tiburello and Victoria, working tirelessly to provide for their large brood. Tiburello was a silversmith, crafting jewelry and tools, while Victoria tended the home and the children, her days filled with cooking, cleaning, and caring for a family in a village where electricity and running water were luxuries most couldn't dream of. Lina was a small, quiet child with big, curious eyes, often seen playing outside with her siblings or helping her mother with small chores, like fetching water from the village well. At 5 years old, she was still learning the world, chasing chickens, giggling at the sight of a stray goat, or clinging to her mother's skirts during the village's festivals, where music and dance brought the community together under the stars. But in early 1939, everything changed. Victoria noticed something alarming. Lina's belly was growing, slowly at first, then more noticeably, as if something unnatural was taking hold. At first, the family feared a tumor or some mysterious illness, a terrifying prospect in a village with no doctor and limited access to medicine. Desperate for answers, Tiburello carried Lina on his back for miles, trekking to mountains to the nearest town, Pisco, where a small hospital might offer help. The journey was grueling, hours on foot, with Lina cradled in her father's arms, her small body frail against the harsh Andean terrain. When they finally reached the hospital, doctors examined Lina and delivered a diagnosis that turned their world upside down. Lina wasn't sick. She was 7 months pregnant. A 5-year-old child, barely old enough to tie her own shoes, was about to become a mother. The news was incomprehensible, a violation of everything natural, leaving the family in shock and the doctors grappling with a case unlike any they'd ever seen. How could this happen to a little girl in a village so small, so far from the world's gaze? The answer would spark a mystery that endures to this day. The hospital in Pisco was a small, understaffed facility, its whitewashed walls and creaky beds a far cry from the advanced medical centers of Lima, Peru's capital. But even here, the doctors were stunned by Lina Medina's condition. Dr. Gerardo Lozada, the lead physician, examined Lina with a mix of disbelief and urgency. At 5 years and 7 months old, Lina was experiencing precocious puberty, a rare condition where a child's body begins puberty far too early, sometimes due to hormonal imbalances or genetic factors. Tests showed that Lina had fully developed sexual organs, her ovaries functioning as if she were a teenager, not a kindergartner. Her pregnancy was advanced, her tiny frame carrying a nearly full-term baby, a medical anomaly that defied everything the doctors knew about human development. They knew they couldn't handle the birth in Pisco. Lina needed specialized care. Dr. Lozada arranged for her to be transferred to a larger hospital in Lima, a journey of over 200 miles, where she could be monitored by experts and safely deliver the child. On May 14, 1939, Lina underwent a cesarean section at the maternity hospital in Lima, performed by Dr. Lozada and a team of specialists. The procedure was delicate. Lina's small pelvis couldn't handle a natural birth, and the doctors worked carefully to ensure both she and the baby survived. Against all odds, the surgery was a success. Lina gave birth to a healthy boy, weighing 5.9 pounds, whom they named Gerardo after Dr. Lozada. The baby was born without complications, a miracle in itself. But the joy of new life was overshadowed by a grim reality. Lina's pregnancy wasn't a natural occurrence. It was the result of abuse. At 5 years old, she couldn't consent, couldn't understand what had happened to her body. Someone had violated her, a crime so heinous it's hard to fathom. Suspicion fell on her father, Tiburello, who was arrested shortly after the birth. The police questioned him for days, searching for evidence, but found none. No witnesses, no confessions, nothing to tie him to the crime. He was released, and the investigation stalled, leaving a gaping hole where justice should have been. Doctors speculated the abuser could have been a family member, a neighbor, or someone in the village, but Lina, too young to articulate what happened, never identified the perpetrator. Her case became a medical marvel, documented in journals worldwide. But the darker truth, the crime against a child, remained unsolved, a shadow over the miracle of her survival. How could such a tragedy go unanswered in a world that's supposed to protect its children? After the birth, Lina Medina's life was forever altered, her childhood stolen in a way most of us can't imagine. At 5 years old, she returned to Ticrapo with her family. But the village she once knew as a place of play and safety was now a place of whispers and stares. Neighbors, once friendly, looked at her with a mix of pity and curiosity, their hushed conversations trailing behind her as she walked by, clinging to her mother's hand. Lina, still a child in every way that mattered, didn't fully understand what had happened to her, but she could feel the weight of the world's gaze. Her son, Gerardo, was raised as her brother, a decision made by her parents to shield her from the reality of her situation and to give her a chance at some semblance of normalcy. Victoria and Tiburello cared for Gerardo as their own, feeding him, clothing him, and watching him grow alongside Lina, who was more like a playmate than a mother. But normalcy was hard to come by. News of Lina's case spread far beyond Ticrapo, reaching newspapers in the United States, Europe, and beyond. Headlines screamed, "5-year-old mother and medical marvel in Peru," turning Lina into a global sensation overnight. Reporters flocked to the village, their cameras flashing as they tried to capture a glimpse of the little girl who defied nature. Medical journals published detailed reports, marveling at her precocious puberty, a condition so rare occurs in about 1 in 10,000 children, while speculating about the hormonal imbalances that allowed her body to conceive at such a young age. Some doctors even traveled to Ticrapo, offering money to study Lina further, proposing to take her to the U.S. for research. Her parents refused, protective of their daughter, but the attention was relentless. Offers came from circus promoters and filmmakers, wanting to exploit her story for profit, seeing her not as a child who'd suffered, but as a spectacle to be displayed. Through it all, Lina remained silent, her voice lost in the noise of the world's fascination. She went back to school when she was able, learning to read and write alongside other children. But the innocence of childhood, play without care, dreaming without fear, was gone. The trauma her experienced, the birth, and the global scrutiny left scars that no one could see, scars that would shape the rest of her life. How does a child heal when the world won't let her forget? As the years passed, Lina Medina tried to carve out a life in the shadow of her past. She and Gerardo grew up together in Ticrapo, their bond more like that of siblings and mother and son. Gerardo, a healthy and curious boy, called Lina's sister, a reflection of the family's decision to raise him as one of their own. They played together in the dusty streets, kicking a makeshift ball made of rags, or sat side by side at the small village school, sharing a wooden desk as they learned their letters and numbers. Lina, though older by just 5 years, took on a protective role, holding Gerardo's hand when they walked home, shielding him from the stray dogs that roamed the village. But the truth of their relationship was always there, a silent undercurrent in their lives. Gerardo didn't learn that Lina was his mother until he was 10 years old, a revelation that came during a visit to Lima when a doctor casually mentioned it in his presence. The news confused him, reshaping his understanding of his family. But he and Lina remained close, their connection rooted in shared experiences and the love of family doing its best to heal. Lina's parents worked hard to give both children a stable life, despite their limited means. Victoria cooked hearty meals of potato stew and quinoa, while Tiburello continued his silversmith work, crafting small trinkets to sell to market in Pisco. The family faced poverty, like most in Ticrapo, but they found joy in small moments, celebrating birthdays with a simple cake made of cornmeal or gathering with neighbors for the village's annual harvest festival, where music filled the air and children danced under the moonlight. Lina, now a teenager, began to dream of a future beyond Ticrapo. She excelled in school, her quiet determination shining through, and hoped to one day leave the village for a better life. But the weight of her past never fully lifted. Whispers followed her everywhere. Neighbors who knew her story, new families who heard the rumors, all casting glances that reminded her of the trauma she couldn't escape. Gerardo, too, felt the sting of those whispers as he grew older, the knowledge of his origin setting him apart in a village where everyone knew everyone's business. How do you build a normal life when your very existence is a reminder of a crime the world can't forget? As Lina Medina entered adulthood, she sought to leave the past behind and build a life of her own. In the 1950s, she moved to Lima, the bustling capital of Peru, a city of over 1 million people, far different from the quiet village of Ticrapo. Lima offered opportunities Ticrapo never could. Schools, jobs, a chance to blend into the crowd and escape the whispers that followed her for years. Lina found work as a secretary, a job that gave her independence and a sense of normalcy. She was diligent, her co-workers noting her quiet efficiency, though she rarely spoke of her past. In 1972, at the age of 39, Lina married Raul Gerardo, a kind man who accepted her for who she was, not the headlines that had defined her childhood. Together, they had a son, Raul Jr., born when Lina was 40, giving her a chance to experience motherhood on her own terms, in a way she never could with Gerardo. The family settled in a modest neighborhood in Lima, where Lina focused on raising her son and building a stable home, far from the spotlight that had once consumed her. Gerardo, meanwhile, grew into a healthy adult, pursuing a career as a mechanic and starting a family of his own. But tragedy struck in 1979, when Gerardo passed away at the age of 40 from bone marrow disease, a condition unrelated to his unusual birth. His death was a devastating blow to Lina, who had already endured so much loss in her life. She mourned quietly, as she had always lived, finding solace in her husband and younger son. Lina's resilience shone through. She continued working, supporting her family, and living a life of dignity despite the trauma of her childhood. She rarely spoke publicly about her experience, turning down interviews and offers to tell her story, even as the world remained fascinated by her case. In the 1980s, a documentary team approached her, offering a large sum to share her story, but Lina refused, saying simply, "I want to be left alone." Her silence was a shield, a way to protect the peace she'd fought so hard to find. As of the early 2000s, Lina was still living in Lima, now in her 70s, a grandmother who had outlived the world's curiosity, but never its questions. Her story remains a testament to the human spirit ability to endure, even in the face of unimaginable hardship. Lina Medina's story is as much about what we don't know as what we do. Nearly a century later, the question of who abused Lina remains unanswered, a haunting mystery that underscores the challenges of seeking justice in a case so unimaginable. In 1939, the investigation into Lina's pregnancy was brief and limited by the resources of time. Ticrapo was a remote village, far from the reach of advanced forensics. No DNA testing, no trained investigators, just a small police force relying on interviews and suspicion. Lina's father, Tiburello, was the first suspect, arrested days after birth when doctors reported the case to authorities. He spent weeks in custody, interrogated about his daughter's condition, but there was no evidence to hold him, no witnesses, no physical proof, and Lina, at 5 years old, couldn't articulate what had happened. Some speculated the abuser might have been a relative, a neighbor, or even someone passing through the village during a festival, where outsiders often mingle with locals. Others pointed to cultural practices in the Andes, where traditional healers sometimes use rituals that could be misinterpreted, though no evidence supported this theory in Lina's case. The lack of answers left a void that fueled speculation for decades. In the 1950s, some researchers suggested Lina's precocious puberty might have been caused by an environmental factor, like exposure to certain plants in the Andes known to affect hormones, but this didn't explain the pregnancy itself. In 2002, a Peruvian journalist tracked down Lina, hoping for clarity, but she refused to speak, her silence a testament to the pain she still carried. Medical experts who reviewed her case in later years confirmed that precocious puberty, while rare, can lead to early fertility, but they emphasize the obvious. Lina's pregnancy was a result of crime, not a natural occurrence. As of today, Lina would be 91 years old. If still alive, her story is still taught in medical schools as a rare case of extreme precocious puberty. But the human side of her story, the trauma, the loss of innocence, the strength it took to survive, remains a powerful reminder of the need to protect our children. Lina's abuser was never found, her justice never served. But her life stands as a beacon of resilience, a call to action for a world that failed her. Lina Medina's story is a heartbreaking reminder of how vulnerable our children are, but it's also a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Lina survived an unimaginable trauma, abused at 5 years old, forced into motherhood, and thrust into the global spotlight. Yet she rebuilt her life with quiet strength, raising a family and finding peace on her own terms. For parents and everyone watching, Lina's journey offers lessons we can't ignore. At Global Shadows, we're here to help you protect the innocence in your life. So let's talk about how you can nurture resilience and safety in your children, inspired by Lina's courage. First, always be vigilant about who your child interacts with, even in the smallest, seemingly safest communities. Lina's abuse likely happened in Ticrapo, a tiny village where everyone knew each other, showing that danger can hide in familiar places. Teach your kids about boundaries early. Let them know their body is their own, and they should tell you if anyone makes them uncomfortable, no matter who it is. Next, foster resilience by helping your children build inner strength. Lina endured a lifetime of scrutiny and pain, but she kept going, finding purpose in her family and work. Encourage your kids to express their feelings, whether through talking, drawing, or play, so they learn to process hardships without breaking. Share stories of people like Lina, who faced the unthinkable but still found a way to live with dignity, showing them that they, too, can overcome challenges. Finally, advocate for justice and support systems in your community. Lina's abuser was never found, partly because Ticrapo lacked the resources to investigate properly. Push for better child protection laws, support local organizations that help abuse survivors, and be a voice for those who can't speak for themselves. Lina's story teaches us that resilience can carry us through the darkest times, but it's our responsibility to ensure no child has to endure what she did. Lina, your strength inspires us all, and we honor the life you built despite the odds. If Lina's story inspires you, subscribe, share, and tell us how you teach your kids resilience.